Breaking the chains of shame. Minor corruption, a small favor in exchange for silence. Scenario: a city employee overhears a colleague admitting to taking office supplies for personal use. Instead of reporting it, they use this knowledge to ask for a favor: cover my shift next week, and I won't say anything. Why it's corrupt: this is a small-scale manipulation of power, using someone's wrongdoing as leverage. It's unethical but doesn't cause large-scale harm. Moderate corruption, business blackmail for personal gain. Scenario: a corporate executive finds out a competitor engaged in questionable dealings. Instead of exposing it, they demand a personal favor, a deal that benefits them financially in exchange for silence. Why it's corrupt: this goes beyond a simple favor, it's coercion for personal profit. It prevents justice from taking place and allows wrongdoing to continue, potentially impacting many people. For years, Daniel had carried a secret, a moment of weakness, a choice he regretted, words he wished he could take back. It was nothing criminal, nothing that had harmed anyone but himself. And yet, in the wrong hands, it had become a weapon. At first, he thought complying was his only option. A whisper in his ear, a subtle threat: do this, and no one has to know. The fear of exposure weighed heavier than the guilt itself. He convinced himself that playing along was survival, that the trade was worth it. But deep down, he knew, each time he gave in, he was giving away a piece of himself. The world rewarded those who knew how to manipulate. He watched as others climbed through corruption, using shame and secrets as currency. Power, built not on integrity but on control. He was part of it now, wasn't he? Bound not by ambition, but by the silent debts he owed to his past. And yet, something inside him refused to break. A whisper, not of fear, but of truth. What if the only reason they had power over him was because he let them? One night, as he sat alone, he faced the one thing he had avoided for so long: himself. What was he so afraid of? Judgment? Ridicule? He had already judged himself harsher than anyone else ever could. The weight of it all pressed down, until he finally made a choice. To forgive himself, not to erase the past, not to justify it, but to release the shame that had chained him. The moment he did, the fear lost its grip. The threats? Empty. The leverage? Gone. No one could use his past against him if he no longer carried it as a burden. Daniel didn't rise through corruption, he rose by breaking free from it. Because true power wasn't about control over others. It was about no longer being controlled by fear. Severe corruption, Trump's alleged abuse of power and coercion. Scenario: Trump, as a sitting president or former leader, has been accused of using political influence, classified information, and personal leverage to protect his own interests, silence critics, and pressure officials into compliance. Examples include: allegedly pressuring Ukraine to investigate a political rival in exchange for military aid. Using legal loopholes to shield himself and allies from consequences. Undermining democratic processes by spreading misinformation about elections and leveraging supporters to challenge legitimate outcomes. Why it's corrupt: this is the most extreme level. It's not just about personal gain but shaping a system to protect power, silence opposition, and manipulate laws. The consequences are just personal, they impact entire countries, democracies, and global stability.